Hi all, welcome to a GC Quick Tip. Today we'll be looking at the Transactions panel and some great tips that I use to tidy up the transaction list and really take control of how it works. So let's do it. Let's start with a very simple file. This one contains just some points, some lines and some solids. But what you can see is I didn't turn on automatic record transactions, and the entire transaction history is grouped inside one single transaction. No worries. What we can do is select the transaction, right click and select Rebuild Transactions. This presents a warning, as this process cannot be undone. So, warning, if you have a very complex and detailed script, now might be a good time to select No and go and back up your file. Otherwise, just click Yes and watch some magic. The transaction script is now rebuilt and expanded into separate transactions related to their nodes. One transaction is a group of similar nodes, in this case, like the points I created. If you'd rather these be individual nodes, you can simply select that transaction, right-click, and select Split Transaction. This will give a similar warning as before, and clicking Yes, the transaction list will now expand to include each point node as a separate transaction. This also works in reverse, so if you wanted all those point transactions to be in a single transaction, you can now select the point transactions, right-click, and select Consolidate Transactions. Again, it'll give you the warning and then rebuilds a transaction list to consolidate the nodes into one transaction. So this is just showing the order of the transactions. But I feel the power of the Rebuild Transactions command is to clean up the tests and trials that I tend to experiment with along the way. This is important when you have auto record transactions turned on, as every move is recorded as a separate transaction. As you can see, I have a few random point nodes that I really don't need anymore in my model, so selecting them in the model view, just with a window selection, shows those nodes in the graph view below. I don't, however, want to select the base ES, so I could zoom in and deselect the base ES, or I could just window select the relevant nodes in the graph. Then I right click and select Delete to remove those nodes. When you now click Play Transactions or Record Transactions, you now see a new transaction at the bottom of the list indicating the deletion of those points. To tidy up the graph, I'd probably just select the nodes and move them up into the position with the other nodes. If I was confident I never needed these again, now would be a great time to rebuild the transaction script again. So selecting all the transactions, right click, select Rebuild Transactions, clicking Yes to the warning, and what happens is GenerativeComponents recognizes that I created and then deleted the point nodes. So they're no longer needed and they can be removed from the history altogether. This is a great way of cleaning up a file before handing it over to other team members, or just removing any redundant information you no longer need. Here's another example, just with a couple of buildings, and in between I have a couple of curves that I no longer need. I could, like the previous example, select them and delete, or if it's a more complex model and you wanted to understand if they had any impact on the overall script, you could identify those transactions in the list, select those, right-click, and select Suppress Transactions. This will turn off those transactions and all those below, the ones you just suppressed. So just select on the last transaction to turn it on. This will run the remainder of the transaction. This is a great method to see if you needed any of those suppressed transactions, as you will definitely get errors if they were required. In this case, all is fine. The two buildings are complete with no errors. I can now go ahead and select all the transactions, right-click, and select Rebuild Transactions. And it rebuilds a nice clean transaction list without those suppressed transactions. So that's my quick tip on transactions. If you have any suggestions for future topics, please let me know in the comments. Please subscribe and click on the bell so you'll be notified when the next video arrives. Until then, thanks for watching.